If your spouse passed away, would you maintain a relationship with your in-laws? Why not? Yes, so they could continue to have a relationship with their grandchild. Depends if there are kids. When my mum passed, I'm thankful my dad maintained contact with her family, so I could grow up around them. My in-laws are amazing. I would expect to maintain a close relationship with them. But hopefully that never happens. My family isn't terrible, but I have felt closer to my marriage family than my own since we started dating. My oldest sister passed away in 1989 before I was born 1994. My whole life I've had this guy named Vince in my family. He's the nicest, sweetest, funniest dude and has always been like a really fun uncle to me. He basically lived with my parents for years after my sister died. My dad took him in as his pseudo-son, and even after he started dated this wonderful woman years later he would still come on family vacations with us. He asked my dad permission to marry his new girlfriend back in the 90s as a sign of respect. Of course he said yes. Unfortunately 2 years ago or so she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and today her condition is getting worse and worse to the point he can't leave the house anymore. He has experienced unimaginable pain for a man to now go through what is essentially 2 deaths of wives in his life. Again, nicest guy ever, and the positivity he's always carried about himself. But yes, if you have a good relationship with in-laws, keep it. Chosen family is forever. Not passed away. But I got divorced almost 20 years ago and still see my former mill and sil when they're in town. And I stay with them when I'm in their town. Love them. When I got divorced, I couldn't wait to get the fuck away from her family. I miss my stepdaughters more than a drowning man misses air. But other than that, I can't wait to read the rest of their obituaries. I like my wife's parents and extended family. And they'd certainly want to know how our son is doing. On top of that, my wife's side of the family is African American. And I feel like my son should have some sort of connection to that heritage. Maybe. But probably not. We don't have kids right now. The only one I would probably still speak to is her little brother. He's a good kid. And her parents are kind of crappy to him. Her sister and brother-in-law use him for free babysitting and chores. His mum takes money out of his account to get her nails done and shit. And his dad is old school religious. When he comes to our house we let him relax and chill cause everyone else is constantly demanding things of him. That would depend on my relationship with them while my spouse was still alive. I probably wouldn't ever talk to them again. No, they are beyond annoying. Yes, they're nicer than my parents. Absolutely not. I would never talk to them again. They are horrific people. Happened to me recently. My ex passed away on December 18, 2022 from a sudden case of severe pancreatitis due to a reaction from a chemotherapy drug she was told to take by her doctors to treat potential return of adrenal cancer. There was no sign of the cancer as of her latest scan, but they said take it anyway. The drug was mitotane. She died in horrible pain and extremely scared. It was a traumatic experience. Her family appreciated me being with her through all of it. They said I will always have a place with them. I talk to them every couple of weeks. I plan to continue to do so. Even when I have a new relationship. Edit. People asking me some questions in DMs. I am detailing the events of this here now. I also want everyone to know that I'm doing a lot better now. I'm sharing this in case anyone wants to know or has a similar experience with trauma to know. You're not alone. This is not a happy story. But I'm really doing much better now. Really. I appreciate the kind words. We were not married but we were engaged. December 9, 2022. My GF called me at 7 a.m. saying she felt sick. I initially was upset and frustrated with her. At the time it was the first day of the new season for the game I play and I thought, ugh, she's sick on league start day. What a bummer. I had no idea what was to come. Unfortunately, this quickly became a much larger issue. She said the stomach pain she had was progressively getting worse. So after about 15 minutes we rushed to the ER. I was obviously concerned and felt bad but still was not that worried. I thought maybe she has an internal cyst burst or appendicitis or something. Sure, it will be bad. But she'll recover. Unfortunately this was not the case. She was diagnosed with pancreatitis from a complication due to a drug she was told to take from her doctors. Initially I did not worry because, she's young and healthy. So she'll be fine, right? She's 36. She'll be fine. I went home from the hospital. Sat down to play my game and did so for like 30 minutes but I was quickly becoming more worried and I couldn't enjoy it or focus on it. The next day, I was becoming increasingly worried as the doctors were talking about how they could not stabilize her and she was experiencing multiple organ inflammation. This quickly became unimaginably scary. How can you go from being totally fine to organ failure as a young healthy 36-year-old? I was very worried. But still I thought she would be okay. I couldn't play my game. Couldn't eat. Couldn't think about anything. I was way too nervous and anxious and was spending most of the day in the hospital. By the next day, Saturday night, she was heavily sedated. I went to see her. She woke up, and the last thing she said to me was, "Baby, I don't want you to see me like this. I'm suffering so much." She was in agony. She said her insides were twisting and burning and stabbing and aching. She could not be consoled. I just told her, "It's okay, baby. You'll be fine." This was by far the most traumatic part of the whole experience. She was not fine. About 8 hours later at 2 a.m. they said she is crashing and they have to intubate her to try to save her life. The next morning they said she could not be stabilized and will die that day. I was in disbelief. How is this possible? So I waited with her all day. I was in shock. And she didn't die yet. Her body was young and was trying to recover. I stayed up in the hospital every day with her for 8 days as she was breathing through a ventilator. Hooked up to dialysis in the ICU. Tubes everywhere. It was a terrible thing to witness. The doctors said the chance she recovers is almost minimal, but they've seen miracles before. It was without a doubt the longest days of my life. On December 18, 2022, she passed away as the court scan showed that her pancreas was far too inflamed and multiple organs were affected. She had swelling in the brain. We took her off of life support and watched her pass. I thought I had been through many rough experiences in my life. I thought I understood stress. In 2013 I found the dead body of my best and closest friend who died at 26 with an undiagnosed heart condition. RIP, U.AHD 887. In 2018 my father had a heart attack and dropped dead in front of my family. I've seen a lot. But staying up watching your GF cling to life and not knowing if she will recover or if she recovers, will she be disabled or have brain damage? That is stress. And the loss was immeasurable. For a week straight I was just unable to do anything. I have a regular schedule of gym, jiu-jitsu, work, gaming, and my GF. I could not do anything at all. It was like a TV where they show a time-lapse of someone standing there totally still as the days go by behind them. Then we had to do the funeral. I had to give the eulogy because her parents weren't capable of it. And I mean, yeah, it was hell. I could not rely on my family because the situation was unbelievably complex. My mother hated her. Absolutely fucking hated her due to my mother's own biases and prejudices. And I chose to not even tell her what was happening because I know my mum and she would have said something that would have made me unable to ever forgive her. I relied very heavily on my sister and my best friend. He was as empathetic and helpful as possible. I was more or less living at his house for 8 hours a day. Talking when I needed to. Crying when I needed to. Smoking a ridiculous amount of weed. And staying completely away from any and all other drugs and alcohol. I don't suggest relying on any substance to deal with trauma. But I did. And I'm just being honest, thank fuck I no longer drink alcohol. And I mean, in time, you start to heal. There's nothing else in the world that will help but time. A few months went by and eventually you find yourself able to find joy in things again. It took several months. I finally got back on the mats and found joy in training again. I finally got back into the gym and lifted again. Eventually I started playing my video game again. I will never ever fully let go of the trauma. That's with me for life. But you will move on from it. We don't have a choice. I will get better. But her parents will have a loss that is likely far worse than mine. I owe it to them to check in on them every now and then. I am 38. Getting older is loving things. Then losing them. Then finding new things. You can't experience love without knowing that at some point you will experience loss of that thing. Everything you love will be lost: your pets, your family, your car, your loved ones. Even the universe itself will eventually die. I've come to learn that this truly is the human condition. But it's not as depressing as it sounds. Because the loss doesn't erase the love. It's just part of it. It's what makes it special. And as you experience more of the loss, it doesn't get easier. But you just get better at dealing with it. The world will keep spinning. And you find new things to love. It's all we can do. The second I started dating their son, my in-laws took me in and treated me like one of their own. I didn't know what a kind, loving family or parents were really like before. Experiencing it was a huge revelation. I would absolutely maintain a relationship with them. And I know they would want the same. My wife died in my arms on May 13 of cancer complications. Her dad called me last night to check in on me and her mum called the day before for the same reason. I call them mum and dad. And they will be that for the rest of my life. I genuinely can't stand my mother-in-law, but she would deserve to see and spend time with her granddaughters. My wife committed suicide 6 years ago today, June 12, 2017. I don't keep in touch with her father because she didn't. She went low contact before we even started dating. But her mother and I reach out to each other every few months to catch up. Absolutely. I have 2 kids under 10. And they are wonderful grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins. Most live halfway across the country. But I would go out of my way to keep them involved in our lives. I've never actually met my in-laws, so there would be nothing to maintain.